and members of the clergy, our chief guest today, the Honorable Professor G.L. Peiris, Minister of External Affairs, Government of Sri Lanka, Your Excellency, our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Roland Silva, distinguished guests, learned scholars and academics, official nominees and visiting delegates from all around the world, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you all to the inauguration of the SAARC International Seminar on Archaeology of Buddhism, Recent Discoveries in South Asia, organized by the SAARC Cultural Center. This is the main event, so to speak, as we have had several events as a run-up to this, as well as parallel events to mark this conference. So we once again warmly welcome you all to the inauguration of this seminar on the Archaeology of Buddhism. And we would like to start this program with the traditional lighting of the oil lamp. For this, I would like to call upon our Chief Guest, Honorable Minister Professor G.L. Peiris, followed by the Director of the SAARC Cultural Center, Mr. G.L.W. Samarasinghe, Her Excellency, the High Commissioner for Pakistan and Sri Lanka, Madam Seema Ilai Baloch, our keynote speaker for today, Dr. Roland Silva, Dr. Gautam Singh Gupta, Director General Archaeology Survey of India, Ms. Kanti Vijay Tunga, Secretary National Heritage, Mr. Vasantha Ekanayaka, Secretary Minister of Culture, Dr. Senarath Dissanayaka, if you are here, sir, Director General Department of Archaeology. We would also like to call the leader of each visiting delegate from representing member states, that is from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So would the leader of the delegation please come up to light the traditional oil lamp? And also we have delegates from the USA, Singapore, Thailand and France. Could you please have them coming up to light the oil lamp as well? I would also like to call upon the Deputy Director for Research, Dr. Sanjay Garg. Could the names I mentioned please come forward to light the oil lamp? Thank you. The Director of the SAARC Cultural Center, Mr. G.L.W. Samarasinghe, to address the gathering.
Reverend Sirs, Honorable Professor G.L. Peiris, Minister of External Affairs, Sri Lanka, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner of Pakistan, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Secretary, Minister of Cultural Affairs, Secretary, Minister of National Heritage, members of the delegates from member states, and other participants from other countries, distinguished dignities, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure and privilege today to welcome you for this very important occasion of the inauguration of the International Conference on Archaeology of Buddhism, organized by the SAARC Culture Center, Colombo. SAARC Culture Center, which is the only regional center in Sri Lanka under the SAARC organization, has been engaged in promotion of cultural cooperation for bringing the people of South Asia closer and to project the distinctive cultural identity of the region. SAARC Culture Center has been conducting a series of programs in Sri Lanka and other member states related to culture in this respect to achieve the mandatory objectives of the center to give opportunities for the people of the region to develop cultural relations for the benefit of them. By organizing this international conference on archaeology of Buddhism, first time in Sri Lanka, SAARC Culture Center is trying to provide a platform for the scholars and academics who have conducted research and surveys on archaeology for the past 4-5 decades in South Asian countries, to create a fruitful dialogue on their findings and discoveries on archaeology of Buddhism. When tourism was developed as a leading leisure industry in the world, during the last 6 decades or so, all Buddhist archaeological sites in Asia were very popular for the tourists from Western countries. Obvious result of that popularity was that numerous national and international archaeological missions came forward to conduct more and more research on new and existing archaeological sites in Asia. In this attempt, all South Asian region was one of the main archaeological grounds busy with research and surveys in the world during the last 4-5 decades. Scholars have identified the richness and value of the archaeological heritage of South Asia by their findings and discoveries of the research work they have conducted. We understand that most of the new findings and discoveries of those research work lay behind, and these findings and discoveries should come up to light, and the recommendations made referring those findings should be conveyed to the policymakers of the member states for policy formulation. That is the final outcome of this international conference on archaeology of Buddhism. Today, for this very important event, we are proud that Honorable Professor G.L. Pieris, Minister of External Affairs Sri Lanka, has come here to grace the occasion as the chief guest. We appreciate his presence for this historic event taking place first time in Sri Lanka. At the same time, I would like to pay my gratitude for all the governments of member states, all high commissions and embassies of the member states in Sri Lanka, SAARC Secretariat, Ministries of External Affairs, Culture and the Arts, National Heritage, and all other institutes and individuals for the assistance given for the event to be a success. In addition, I have to express my special appreciation to Most Venerable Kirama Vimalajyothero, Chief Priest of the Buddhist Cultural Center, for his kind collaborative support for this conference. Finally, welcoming you all once again, I invite all the scholars and academics to give their utmost contribution for the conference to come up with a useful outcome for the benefit of the common people of the world as well as the South Asian region. That is what we expect finally from this from this sort of a conference, and I would like to express my appreciation to all delegates from member states and other participants from other countries for kindly taking off time from your busy schedule and traveling across the region to attend this conference in Colombo. And I wish you a very happy and pleasant stay in Colombo. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our keynote speaker for today is an eminent and respected scholar. Dr. Roland Silva is an architect, archaeologist and conservator by profession. He was the president of the Institute of Architects Sri Lanka 1971 to 72, president of the Council of Archaeologists 1996 to 1998, and the president of ICOMOS 1990 to 1999. He was also the Commissioner of Archaeology and the Director General of the Central Cultural Fund that implemented the UNESCO Sri Lanka project of the Cultural Triangle. He also held the UNESCO chair at the Postgraduate Institute of Archaeology. Since 2008, he is the Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa. He is also the founder president of the National Trust Sri Lanka. Dr. Silva holds a degree of Doctor of Letters from Leiden University. He is a fellow of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects, fellow of the Council of Archaeologists, associate of the Royal Institute of British Architects. He holds a postgraduate in archaeology, postgraduate in Studio dei Monumenti from Rome, and Doctor of Science from the University of Moratuwa. Dr. Silva has been decorated with a gold medal for architecture in 1997, a gold medal archaeology in 1996, and the International Gazzola Prize for Conservation 1999. The state has recognized him with many titles, of which he richly deserves. So I think it's very apt that we have him as our keynote speaker today. And without much ado, Dr. Roland Silva to address you with his keynote gathering. The title of his keynote address would be, "Let the sites of Buddhism be living icons of a liberated people." Dr. Roland Silva, please.
Let us first of all congratulate the organizers of the International Conference on Archaeology of Buddhism, Recent Discoveries in South Asia, to discuss the common matters of mutual interest and to evolve appropriate strategies to meet the fundamental requirements of the time. One needs hardly to look far to spot the most important aspect, namely, and I quote, "Let the sites of Buddhism be living icons of a liberated people," unquote. An eternal want by all, at all times, and more so now than ever before. We must and hope that this forum will surely contribute to this vital need by tracing the paths of wisdom as set out by the leader over 2,600 years previously. We believe that our task is to place before this august assembly some salient thoughts that might, in a practical way, achieve these objectives along the trends of human behavior and practice that would seem specific and normal in a present-day context. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, a question that strikes us, thank you, a question that strikes us instantly is what we would best be doing with the recent and not so recent discoveries of Buddhism in South Asia. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, if we in Sri Lanka look back through time to half a century previously, perhaps to World War II and before, nearly all of us would have had the rude shock of expecting surprise, namely, if anyone ever raised the question of a holiday for the family. for this was not the way of life of our parents in this part of the world. On the other hand, the order of the day was a gentler form of travel at the pace of a peaceful pilgrimage. This was the style of the time, and how welcome it all was, and how holy, sacred, and relaxing such journeys were. It is this mode of family life that we wish to develop in this paper concerning let the sites of Buddhism be living icons of a liberated people. For this was the way that generation after generation discovered the sites of Buddhism from time immemorial. The truth of this thought is scribbled on the stone railing at Bodh Gaya by the earliest pilgrims from Sinhala as far back as the 2nd or 3rd century BC. Today, we may have graduated in the science of dating these travels on the basis of the paleographic principles of aging the events of discovery by dating the writing instead of a more sophisticated technique as carbon-14, etc., or any other device, and why not? But in the meanwhile, have we lost some other objectives in the process? We need to answer, but perhaps a change of heart in reading in stone the piety of ancient innocence in such recent discoveries. Gentle people, we are about to strike an accord of sympathetic resonance and see if this rhythm of a time that ends perhaps 50 years previously can be struck again, perhaps with modern synergy and a sense of spiritual upliftment. It is our wish to get the Buddhist leaders of South and Southeast Asia and the discoverers of this region to extend their wisdom to the mass of people to act wisely and sensitively to their conscience and thereby retain their free will to voice a view within one's self. We believe that such a situation can be achieved if the mass of people are provided with rhythmic breaks of annual colloquia or pilgrimages, or even in an armchair excavation guided by specialist supervisors, where one is able to either individually or collectively think of their distant goals and far-sighted objectives with proper balance and focused vision. It is this type of forgotten ground rules that we need to re-trot and rediscover by our own selves with traditional wisdom that we in the ancient world advanced well beyond the rest of humankind in a yester era, and thereby establish and continue to move forward with outstanding civilizations of old and yet others that were not so old. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, it will not be out of context to state here that the Master, even after his enlightenment in the 35th year of his life, still performed in his retreat for the purpose of spiritual quiet. If this was the Master's example, how much more should we all not indulge in such moments of quiet, away from the day-to-day routines, to refresh the inner self of each of us from the discoveries of our colleagues and self-bound with their unique interpretations. These exercises need not be the spiritual khasines or listed out by Buddhaghosa in his Visuddhimagga of the 5th century, but with modest courses of action akin to our times and by the rhythm of today. This is why we have picked on pilgrimages that are still very plausible and current, and test if this activity cannot be suitably molded into a type of modern day meditation retreats on wheels. Such spiritual revival, rethinking, and restructuring of oneself can evolve a path to self-purification, and this thus useful both towards these objectives and in identifying the virtual stepping stones of discovery. Even in these should be material means towards spiritual goals. Venerable Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, where can such meditation retreats be carried out except at the spiritual elevated grounds of discovery and as at the old sites of building Buddhist pilgrimage? Say, for example, if some enterprising leaders were to identify the old pilgrim routes of South and Southeast Asia with a story of their evolution through discovery, then these could be the stepping stones to Buddhist entrepreneurship and the path to the mini heavens of spiritual travel in these regions. Some such routes could be the following, with themes culled out of journeys trodden by the Master, the sites of relic enshrinement as discovered, the religious routes traced in the spread of Buddhism, the restful shrines of the well-known pilgrim fathers, or the many productive journeys undertaken by the early disciples. I have listed out a whole series of such sites throughout South and Southeast Asia, which I presume you would be able to glance through and look at them seriously when the publication is out. Venerable Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, the aims of this paper are twofold. As such, as the proposal is a pragmatic one related to a religio-economic and cultural touristic exercise, the latter two aspects are presently on a high growth trend. A marshaled SARC pilgrim unit, if properly established, could attempt an action-oriented forward march devoid of mercenary considerations. The religio-cultural values of such a move should be preeminent, and this should be the dynamo of operations that should sit for such an enterprise to move. If appropriate institutions can be encouraged to provide for Buddhist pilgrimages with the above attitudes in mind, the deeper precepts of the religion and their pragmatic applications to life will undoubtedly remold the participants to a modernistic context. The establishment of such a venture would be a practical proposal that could be considered as a follow-up of this conference. UNESCO, as the guardian of world culture, has set out trends of heritage growth. One is the concept of world monuments and sites. The discovered Buddhist monuments of Asia should therefore take their rightful place in this regard. If such a philosophical idea is linked with pragmatic objectives, the project will surely spark itself off to action at an improved pace, as there is also and inert potential to entrepreneurship under the umbrella of cultural tourism. Already, many countries of South and Southeast Asia have world Buddhist monuments and sites of significance. This initiative of UNESCO should, on the one hand, be followed up by the entrepreneur unit of the Buddhist pilgrimages, and on the other, the marshaled SARC pilgrim unit should continue to campaign with UNESCO for more World Heritage listing among the newly discovered Buddhist sites in these regions. Some of the discovered Buddhist sites of importance and those worthy of further attention are perhaps the following. There are sites, so many sites in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh, I have listed them all here, Bhutan, Brunei, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam. Venerable Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, if the proposals submitted above are accepted, many of these discovered places will probably be World Heritage Sites of Buddhist activity in the future. You can see for yourself how many of these places are still pending ratification and how much of the authorities need to persuade for appropriate listing. But be that as it may, even if these are itemized, it will not automatically blossom out as sites of veneration by its ardent per se. These needs to be progressive want. There needs to be a progressive want and a serious need to stir such sites of inspiration to meet the objectives of humans today, to rediscover the path to peace, or to identify the life's ideals in contentment. In these environments of sacredness, through Buddhist pilgrimages, the listed sites are not on an automatic queue to World Heritage listing. Either, therefore, deliberate campaign efforts needs to be carried out by the organizations like this conference and the follow-up by the marshaled SARC unit with sensitive resolutions. Decisions resulting from gatherings like the present conference can be the catalyst to such enlightened objectives for world recognition. These steps so taken need not be totally socio-religious, but can have a major economic component as well. But these monetary advantages have to be cautiously guided lest they fall into the normal rhythm of mundane tourist enterprises, often lacking in any spiritual component. In this regard, I'd like to also mention that a site like Pagan, which came in for listing when I was still at the helm of investigating such sites, and returned only for some literary corrections, never came back, and that was in 1999. And it is still not a World Heritage Site. I wish some authorities, maybe even the guest of honor here today, as the Minister of External Affairs, can take up these matters with the relevant authorities in Burma or Myanmar and see that these sites come on the World Heritage List. I once said that if Pagan is not on the World Heritage List, scrap the World Heritage List. Scrap the World Heritage. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, let us touch upon yet another stage in the process of injecting vitality and religious humanness to such sites of religious archaeology. We recall the preparation of the sacred city plan for the ancient city of Anuradhapura in Sri Lanka in 1983. As the head of the Department of Antiquities then, we analyzed the social units of the 1,400-year-old ancient capital of the island from 400 BC to 1000 AD, where in the expanse of 4.5 miles north-south and a distance of 3.5 miles east-west, we identified 17 religious units of the Buddhists. In preparing the land use distribution of this unique World Heritage Site for future protection, we set apart 17 small plots as modern religious centers adjacent to the ruins. The new units were meant as elements of revitalization that could have been injected, a concept of revival, veneration at such holy grounds. While these were being carefully excavated and conserved, and the religious heritage laid bare to pilgrims and visitors, our idealistic objective was that a simple ground floor residence of a caretaker monk could have been established at each of these 17 religious units, adopting traditional architecture and evolving a practice of veneration at the sites on a daily, weekly, monthly, monthly and annual basis. We even visualize a situation where each of the 17 Buddhist shrines of old could be persuaded to share the 12 or 13 full moon days of the year for their annual religious processions or perharas every month. By this arrangement, in the holy city of Anuradhapura, the political and religious capital of 1,400 years of Sri Lanka could come alive once again to its pristine glory and its splendor. Excuse me. This, we believe, is probably an attitude of new light and fresh thinking that needs to be extended to the other World Heritage and potential World Heritage sites in the countries of South and Southeast Asia. Venerable sirs, ladies and gentlemen, a second effort of a parallel kind was attempted with the UNESCO Sri Lanka project of the Cultural Triangle of Sri Lanka, and this time with the second capital of the country, Polonnaruwa, which is also a World Heritage City. It is known that this city had 16 religious sites, or Sosmasthana, in ancient times, of which only about a dozen have been identified today. During the excavation, conservation and landscaping of these sites of the Cultural Triangle at Polonnaruwa, under the items of layout, we programmed a display, not only the site for the interest of tourists, but attempted to inject an element of religious life into these 16 places by organizing some spiritual activity on each of the full moon days. Together with the help of the Venerable Thera in charge of the World Heritage City of Polonnaruwa, the project officials and the people in the vicinity, this activity included modest offerings being made at a given time, followed by a short sermon and a moment of meditation at each of the sites. It was also a regular practice to plan these events at the monthly progress meetings of the site with the Venerable Thera participating at the discussions. The basic provision of a flower altar and other ritual amenities were also made available. It was also the custom for the laborers working at such a site to terminate their work half an hour before the due time and end the activities with offerings and some short moment for private meditation. These events provided a great sense of spiritual commitment in terms of workers, and each action ended with substantial material benefits as well to the organization, as the quality of the work was invariably assured. Venerable Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, the third and the most effective instrument of strategy was with the establishment of an appropriate organization to marshal resources for cultural activity. On this count, we accepted the premise that even a Prime Minister of a country has some soft spot for culture. And it was undoubtedly a risk in testing the truth of this, due to the heavy burdens of work associated with such an offer. However, a serious proposal was submitted to the Cabinet of Ministers of Sri Lanka to set up the Central Culture Fund, and the Prime Minister of the country be made the statutory chairman of this organization. The gamble worked, and consequently the whole host of cabinet ministers found sympathy with the proposal and welcomed the invitation to be a member of this prestigious body. The finance minister, who also agreed to be a participant, provided all the financial incentives that one could dream of as part of the resources and other financial legislation under this Act. The outcome of this major breakthrough was such, followed by success, for the right messages were seriously transmitted to all concerned from the very highest in the land. An independent view of masterly achievements after 14 years of preferred activity is seen in the statement of the Director General of UNESCO in 1994, when he added the member states, addressed the member states in this third appeal on behalf of UNESCO Sri Lanka, the project of the Cultural Triangle thus. I've been told that the chief guest is due to leave. May I conclude this? Unfortunately, I have the paper which I have is not with you, or it is in the book. I guess you will read, and I assure you it will be a good sleeping pill. May I just touch one point? The report of the Director General of UNESCO was, the government of Sri Lanka has demonstrated its support for the campaign by designing the Board of Governors of the Central Culture Fund, which is composed of the Prime Minister as chairman, together with 6 ministers and several other high-level officials to coordinate and manage the campaign activities. Campaign organization is a model of efficiency with clear lines of authority, rapid decision-making mechanisms, and excellent coordination of field work at all 6 sites. Their highly committed staff is by now well experienced in all aspects of campaign management. And I get to the last paragraph of the document. I've said, Venerable Sirs, ladies and gentlemen, may the Triple Gem bless the designers and the participants of this conference and provide the strength necessary to achieve the objectives of their fine wisdom. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. And like mentioned, the keynote address is in the book of abstracts compiled by the SAR Cultural Center, so you could always have a read and of course speak to Dr. Silva after the event. We would now like to call upon our chief guest, a distinguished scholar himself, the Honorable Professor G.L. Peiris, Minister of External Affairs, Government of Sri Lanka, to address the gathering.
The most venerable Anunayaka of the Balok chapter, Your Excellency Seema Elahi Balok, High Commissioner of Pakistan in Sri Lanka, distinguished delegates, Dr. Roland De Silva, ladies and gentlemen. I consider it a great privilege to have been invited to share a few thoughts with you on this very significant occasion when you are discussing a theme that is undoubtedly of relevance and importance, not just to our country, but indeed to the SAARC region as a whole. It is therefore a very timely initiative on the part of the SAARC Cultural Council. What strikes me as the most conspicuous characteristic of the functioning of SAARC today, the trajectory of its development, its vision for the future, is that SAARC is essentially people-based. It is not just an association of 8 governments of the region, but the focus is very much on the well-being of the people at large. And this is reflected in every major activity that has been undertaken by the SAARC countries in the recent past. This region is home to 1/5 of humanity, and it is very vibrant in terms of economic development. But all our countries in unison are declaring that what is important to them is not just economic development per se, but equitable distribution of the fruits of development. It is only then that economic development comes alive in the hearts and the minds of the people who inhabit these countries. So the people-centered approach is at the very heart of the SAARC organization. This is reflected in a whole range of matters. For example, the development of trade, breaking down of barriers, facilitating the movement of goods, people and services across national frontiers, links among universities, professionals, academics, religious leaders. All these are part of the milieu of SAARC. But having said that, I want to emphasize that among all these strands, undoubtedly the most important strand is the religious and spiritual experience of the SAARC region, which is uniquely rich. Perhaps it has more to offer in terms of history, in terms of culture, in terms of tradition than any other part of the world. So a whole reservoir of spiritual experience handed down from generation to generation. This is the distinguishing feature of the SAARC region. And it is this attribute that marks us out from, I would say, all other regions of the globe. Now, if we look at the psyche of our people, I think there is little doubt that relics, the worship of relics, is something that is deeply entrenched in the beliefs and the value systems of our people. We believe, for example, that when we are in the presence of the relics of Gautama, Lord Buddha, we are indeed in the living presence of the Enlightened One. Now we saw this for ourselves with the exposition of the Kapilavastu relics, the Sri Sarvajana Dhatu in our country. I was present when the relics were brought to Kalaniya, a vast concourse of humanity. An outpouring of religious fervor, of devotion. This was inspired by the presence of the relics. The Buddha visited this island on 3 occasions. First time to Mahayangana, second Nagadipa, and the third was to Kalaniya itself. Now, throughout our history, the Mahavansa bears it out. We have received relics of the Buddha from India and other countries, and from what is today Nepal. For example, the sacred tooth relic, which is now housed in Kandy, was brought to our country by an Indian princess, Hema Mali, the daughter of a king of Kalinga, Guhasiva. And the sacred tooth relic, for example, has even a political dimension. In times of turbulence, the belief was that possession of the tooth relic was a demonstration of legal and moral entitlement to govern the country. And this was respected even during British times. It is an unbroken tradition. British governors also respected it. And today, when the Perahera is held in the month of August, at the conclusion of this cultural pageant, which many of you from neighboring SAARC regions would be delighted to witness, the inflexible rule is that no less than the head of state has to be personally informed that all matters connected with the Perahera have been satisfactorily concluded. There is nobody who can receive that message on behalf of the President of Sri Lanka. So that is the extent to which the veneration of relics has taken root in the culture and the belief systems of our people. The sacred bow sapling was sent to our country by no less than Dharmasoka. And it was his own daughter, Keri Sanghamita, who brought the sacred bow sapling to our country. The Patra Dhatu, the bowl which the Buddha used to take his meals, was also sent to Sri Lanka. The Kapilavastu relics, which were excavated 113 years ago in Piprava, which is now a part of the Indian state of Bihar. The Indian archaeologist Srivastava was prominently associated with it. The excavation was started by Pepe and continued by Alexander Cunningham. And it is those relics that are now in Sri Lanka and will be here until the 5th of September. The Kapilavastu relics will go to no fewer than 7 provinces of Sri Lanka for public veneration. So all of this indicates the importance of relic worship and what it means to the people at large in this country. Now, I want to conclude with this thought. All of this translates into something important from the point of view of the quality of life in our country. The teachings of the Buddha are kept alive by this kind of practice, which appeals directly to the hearts and minds of the people of our country. I saw myself the degree of enthusiasm of the people who came to Kalaniya to reach out and to pay homage to the relics of Gautama, the Buddha, or the Lord Buddha. Now, I think this is absolutely important. As we reflect on the essence of Buddhism, which was never more relevant than it is in contemporary times. It is a philosophy that is not confined to any particular age or civilization. It has eternal validity. And as we look at the world around us, as we examine the turbulence and the ways and means of dealing with that turbulence, much that is contained in the Buddha Dharma will certainly be beneficial in these troubled times. The essence of Buddhism is satiation, contentment, not to strive for more and more, because then you will not have peace of mind. In the Vaddi Sutra, the Buddha speaks of overconsumption, abuse of the environment, never being satisfied, always wanting to expand the contours of self-gratification, that is a road to ruin and to spiritual and moral degradation. Nowhere is that more graphically illustrated in the Buddha Dhamma than in the Swarna Hansa Japati, where a person dies, it's in the form of a parable. He sees that his wife and daughter are in adverse financial circumstances. He manifests himself in the form of a golden swan and sheds a feather so that his family can sell this golden feather and obtain a sufficient income to meet their daily needs. In due course, the daughter tells the mother, "Why are we satisfied with one feather? Let us kill the goose, collect all the feathers and accumulate a vast fortune." Then the golden feathers turn into ash and it has no monetary value at all. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha expounds in considerable detail the necessity for a certain equanimity of mind, a certain balance, a certain poise of mind. It is an inner peace which you will not be able to attain however much material wealth you accumulate, whatever you achieve in life in material terms. This internal serenity is what is required to attain true happiness. So that is the epitome of Buddhism, and in order to transmit that in a way that would reflect itself in the lives of ordinary people, relic worship, proximity to the temples, that is very much a part of our culture. People like Professor Ralph Pires, a very distinguished professor of sociology, shows how important the temple was. Recently, Professor J.V. Dissanayake, who was professor of Sinhala during my tenure as Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo, has brought out a very interesting work. It is an illustrated work which revolves around the two most important people in the village, the head priest of the temple and the peasant, and the symbiotic relationship between the priest and the peasant. So that is very much a part of our culture. Now, pervading that all is a deep substratum, a substratum of spiritual values which are encapsulated in graphic terms in relic worship, which brings people closer to the religion that they believe in. So that, I think, is the fundamental importance of the topic that you are discussing in these proceedings. I wish you well. I think you have chosen a topic that undoubtedly has meaning and substance for all our lives in the SAARC region. It is therefore a great pleasure for me, on behalf of the government of Sri Lanka and also on my own personal behalf, to extend a very warm and cordial welcome to all of you who are visiting us from the SAARC region. I hope you will have a fruitful conference and that your deliberations will lead to practical results that will contribute to the well-being of all our nations. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Your insight on veneration of sacred relics, relic worship, and its direct impact on humanity was clearly portrayed in your address. And we hope this conference would further enhance us with a deeper understanding based on the teachings of Buddhism. As our chief guest leaves, we now call upon the person behind the conceptualization of this entire program, and that's none other than Dr. Sanjay Garg, Deputy Director Research of the SAARC Cultural Center, to deliver the vote of thanks.
venerable members of the Mahasangha, members of the diplomatic corps, delegates from the SAARC member countries, participants from the other countries, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you with a heavy load of indebtedness, and it is my beholden duty to propose this vote of thanks on behalf of the SAARC Culture Center and also on my personal behalf. It gives me a great pleasure to thank all those who directly or indirectly, covertly or explicitly, or in any substantial or any minuscule way, helped us in organizing this very important event, the SAARC International Conference on Archaeology of Buddhism, the Recent Discoveries in South Asia. It is now time to pay our gratitude and acknowledge the hard work and contribution of many people who made this event possible. On behalf of the SAARC Culture Center, let me first of all thank our chief guest who had to leave this venue because of his prior engagement with the visiting foreign dignitaries. Honorable G.L. Paris, not only for sparing his valuable time, but also for nurturing this nascent SAARC Culture Center and for providing his patronage to all its activity, and we continue to look forward for his continued patronage. We also thank the keynote speaker, Dr. Roland Silva, Chancellor of the Morotava University, for his scholarly keynote address, which you will find the full text in the Book of Abstracts, in fact, which opens a new vista for future researches and heritage conservation initiatives in this very important field of study of Buddhist archaeology. Let me add, Honorable Keynote Speaker, that you talked about the marshaled SAARC unit. And at the SAARC Culture Center, we had been developing this idea of how to recognize the sites which are more than a national heritage site and which have not yet been recognized as a World Heritage Site. So in between, we can have something like the SAARC heritage sites and on the same analogy as the World Heritage Sites. So that is very much under consideration, and very soon we'll come out with a plan on that matter. So thank you, Dr. Roland Silva, for shedding the light on the future researches. The SAARC Culture Center owes its sincere gratitude to the men behind the series of the documentary films and also the photographic exhibition which is on display at the J.D.A. Pereira Gallery, Mr. Binoy Bahal. He too had to leave because of his other engagement. We thank the most venerable Kirama Vimal Jyoti Thero, the director of the Buddhist Culture Center, for his support and personal interest in all the events associated with the conference. Any event of such an enormity is always a result of help from numerous quarters. Many organizations and individuals whom we approached for support were very prompt and forthcoming in lending their helping hand to us. We thank the Ministries of National Heritage and of Cultural Affairs and Art for their help and support, and in particular, we owe our gratitude to the Honorable Minister Dr. Jagat Pala Surya and Honorable Minister T.B. Ekanayake for their, and the secretaries Mrs. Kanti Vijayadunga and also Mr. Vasant Ekanayake. We also thank various cultural institutions under the two ministries, namely the Department of Archaeology, the National Museum, the National Archives, and the Central Cultural Fund, who lent their support, and in particular we thank Dr. Sarat Desanayake, Director General of Archaeology, Dr. Nanda Vikramasinghe, Director General of National Museum, Dr. Saroja Vetasinghe, Director General of the National Archives, and Professor Gamani Adhikari, Director General of the Central Cultural Fund. Sri Lankan Airlines, the official airlines of the conference, we thank them for their support. We thank the Bank of Ceylon, the principal sponsor for our another associated event, the exhibition of paintings. We thank the Light of Asia Foundation, especially its founder chairman, Mr. Naveen Gunaratne, a committed friend of the SAARC Culture Center. We thank the Vice Chancellor of the University of Jayawardhanapura for providing the media coverage to the entire events. and to Dr. Prasad Jayavira and Mr. Manoj Upasanta for helping us in this regard. We thank Messrs. Atkin Spence Travels, our travel partner in the post-conference tour. We also thank the Ceylon Tea Board for their support. We thank the Embassy and High Commissioners of the SAARC member states in Sri Lanka for their support. Especially, I would like to thank His Excellency Ashok K. Kanta, High Commissioner of India in Sri Lanka, for extending his unflinching support in organizing the screening of the documentary films and also the photographic exhibition. The SAARC Division, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of Sri Lanka, especially its Director General, Mr. V. Krishnamurthy, and the SAARC Secretariat in Kathmandu. A special thank to the India-Sri Lanka Foundation, which has supported the participation of many Indian scholars in this conference. We thank our friends from the media, both print and electronic, especially the Buddhist TV, the Rupavahini, the SLBC, Heritage TV, and Lakbima Group, who joined us in carrying our voice and messages to the farthest corners of this great land and beyond. In fact, we have made arrangement to have the webcasting of all the proceedings, so people from world over can see these proceedings live in the real time. A very special thank goes to the battery of volunteers that have joined us from the University of Jayawardhanapura, from the University of Kelaniya, from the Department of Archaeology, and from the Bhandarkar Institute of International Studies. The entire staff of the SAARC Culture Center, without any exception, all of them have put in the best effort to make this event and all the associated activities. Without naming individually each one of them, I am part of them. Thank you very much, all my colleagues. Finally, I would like to thank our director, Mr. GLW Samarasinghe, the founder director of the SAARC Culture Center, for his guidance and support, which has always been a beacon of inspiration in our endeavors. And a final thank to you, all of who are present here in this event of inauguration of this conference. Without you, this event would not have been what it is now. Thank you for your participation. Have a nice conference ahead of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garg. Reverend members of the clergy, distinguished guests, participants, we kindly ask you to join us for tea right outside. After the tea break, the book exhibition and the poster session of the conference will be inaugurated by the Honorable Minister for Cultural Affairs and the Arts, Government of Sri Lanka, Honorable Minister T.B. Ekanayaka, at the Maya Hall on the 3rd floor. All of you are kindly requested to make yourselves available at 11 sharp. That gives us about 10 minutes for tea. Okay, 11:10 at the Maya Hall, 3rd floor, to be a part of the inauguration of the book exhibition and the poster session. Thank you.